G'day and welcome back to Crank the Third, the podcast where we explore the creative and entrepreneurial side of life post 50. Today got a really special guest for you, but let's get into the intro first. Our voice is the vehicle that drives us, but how do we ensure that our voice reaches and resonates with our intended audience? Whether we are speaking to a boardroom of 10 or a venue of hundreds or an audience of thousands or tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands, our ability to communicate our message is paramount. So says our next guest, Carmen Sederino, and she's a performance master and speaking strategist and the founder of Illuminated Story, where she helps individuals transform high-stakes presentations into unforgettable performances, and we'll get her to unpack that in a minute. Today, we're going to be exploring professional speaking as a viable option for experienced experts and thought leaders and business owners, and explain the lay of the land as it stands currently and what's required for people to prepare for and break into the speaking arena. But first, welcome to the show, Carmen. What were you doing 15 years ago?
Thanks, Trevor. Very excited to be here with you today and to talk to your audience about this exciting topic. 15 years ago, I was actually a senior leader at one of Australia's largest home retailers, and I had a national team of people, and they would visit all of our stores, retail stores across the nation and across into New Zealand actually. And they would make sure that our team members on the shop floor were trained in sales, merchandising, customer service, all the things to make sure that the business was providing amazing customer service, not just in one store, but in all the stores, and a consistent service, because it wasn't a franchise, it was the one business, and very important that customers could go from store to store and get the same amazing experience in each one.
So experience is a word we're going to be hearing a fair bit of in this particular episode, but that's the business side of you, but there are other elements of you as well. Why don't you walk us through that so people get a good feel for who you are and what you do currently?
Yes, so what might be surprising to the audience after hearing that little piece of background from 15 years ago is that I'm a trained actor. So I was actually a very shy child, and if someone spoke to me, I'd go red and look down and not want to engage. My teachers would say I was so quiet in class and I'd just do my work up the back of the classroom. But the whole school would then come and see me perform in a local theatre production, and the teachers would say to my parents, "Oh my goodness, I cannot believe that is the same child. Like, how is that Carmen up there on stage with the big voice, playing the big characters and in front of hundreds of people?" So I went on and formally trained and got a qualification in acting. I did a Bachelor of Performing Arts at Monash University in Melbourne. And that also taught us about backstage and the lighting, the sound, all the effects that need to happen to bring a theatrical production to life. And I also studied film and television during my university years, so trained for acting to camera, which is quite different to on stage. Mm-hmm. And I actually used a lot of that in the business world that I was a part of, because my team had to deliver a lot of training. They had to speak at state meetings. They had to speak in front of people that were a lot more senior than them, which was very daunting for them to begin with until they'd gone through some coaching and training. So now I run Illuminated Story, which is a business that, as you said, helps professional speakers and non-professional speakers, to be honest, deliver their message in a way that's not just heard, but remembered and not forgotten. So Illuminated Story is really a blend of that business, marketing, sales, operations experience, as well as that performance background I have, blended into one.
It's really interesting how you've intersected, your film and TV, but your acting and also your business background and that side of things. Because I think that there's a lot of people out there who are business owners or professionals, and they've probably got these different sides to their professional life, and they've probably never really even intersected them. And so maybe there's a little lesson there to kick us off with, that's how you can stand out in the marketplace and be a little unique in the eyes of people because you're intersecting a number of different unique skill sets. And that makes you different and unique to your competitors. So I wanted to get into we first got in contact some weeks ago, and you've just released a report. It's the Future of Speaking in 2025 report. I want to break that down and then after that go through a bit more about how you help people, because I think, for professionals and business owners and thought leaders and people who have been in the trenches and, this audience, the people who listen to this show, it's really, they've been around, in the professional trenches for some 30 plus years. They're the ones we want to hear from often. They're the ones with the wisdom and the experience and the knowledge and the stories and the war wounds and the scars on the knuckles. So let's hear from them. And no doubt they've done public speaking in the past, and no doubt for a lot of them it was not the best experience, but it's not as, we've all experienced, even if we've become a speaker and a professional speaker, you always, those early days are a bit scary for most people. I would imagine you'd come across that as well, but that doesn't mean that they haven't, speaking is not necessarily something that they have thrown completely out and it's still in the bottom drawer, and they might wish, I wouldn't mind trying this speaking caper again, or taking it a little bit more seriously as part of their career and where they are at the moment. So speaking in 2025, the world's changed a bit, obviously, since the pandemic, and the speaking industry was upended. What's your take on where things are now versus where they were a few years back?
Yeah, well, thank you. That's a big question. There's a lot of things happening. I think there's a lot of things we can unpack here. One of the things that I think is really interesting at the moment, actually, is that AI can now spit out people speaking and make it look, pretty human, pretty good. I wouldn't say it's the most high quality speaking, but it can do it, and it can do it fast, and it can do it quickly. So what we really need to focus on, I think, is quality, because quantity can happen fairly easily. It's not necessarily great, but it's quantity. Quality is high quality human connection speaking, I think, is what us humans need to focus on moving forward. And as you said, the pandemic really did shift things, because all of a sudden, and people that are professional speakers had to find a new way to reach their audiences. So that virtual world really opened up for us, and it was there beforehand, but we hadn't really leaned into it in the same way that we learned to during that time. And now post that pandemic, there was a period of time where people were still very hesitant. It was like, oh, should we do some in person? Should we not? So we've been through that. And then I really feel there was a period of time where people craved that in-person interaction and, wanted to be in front of people again. And now we also have a hybrid world. So we've got in-person events, we've got virtual events, and then we've got the hybrid events where they're in-person and being streamed out to, thousands, millions, depending on the type of event that's being run. And I guess the challenge for the speaker is that each one of those mediums requires different things from you to truly engage with your audience. Yep. So I think the hybrid setting's by far the biggest challenge. And then, of course, you've got to use different skill sets. Just like I learnt how to act on stage, I learnt how to act to camera. It required different skill sets to really resonate with the audience.
Yeah, I hear you. I know that the first time that I did I think I did a talk to about 400 people online, and it was the hardest thing that I've ever had to do, because I didn't see them. I'm just looking into the camera, and you're presenting, and you feel like you're presenting to no one. It really is hard, but, it is required today, as you say, hybrid. But let's unpack speaking. It could be a small meetup, it could be a seminar, a webinar, it could be online, it could be the combination, it could be on a big stage at an industry conference, it could be in the boardroom in front of a very, very small but very important audience. And, it could be on YouTube. Like, there's so many different variations. So am I right in saying when we're talking about speaking, we're talking about all the modalities and various different
Absolutely.
ways. And as you say, sometimes they're smooshed. That's a technical term, smooshed together.
I love that technical term. I'll have to start using it.
And also don't forget that when a lot of people now, they do a conference and they also have a digital pass to it as well, so people can watch it on demand later. So, yes, you're being filmed often these days as well, so it'll be used elsewhere. So with that background in mind, you had, and can I just, before we get into it, can you walk us through why it's important for and the opportunities for people that, our experience have got a message, the best way to get your message out there? Yeah, sure, we've got social media, we've got content, we've got podcasting, we've got YouTube and everything. But speaking, as you say, is still, the number one way to get your voice out and to connect with an audience. And then you can, do with that what you may. That can go in all sorts of directions. But what's your general view on the importance? And if you had to tell someone and convince them that they've got the goods, you should be speaking as a string to your professional bow, what would you tell them?
Look, what I actually use, and I know it's boring and an old example, but I use Steve Jobs as an example because when you break it down, he was selling a computer or a phone, but he made it cool. And his keynote presentations attracted the world's media to fly in just to hear him launch that new phone or computer, because he turned his keynotes wasn't just a standard keynote. He turned his keynotes into a theatrical performance. And that allowed his messages to be sticky. It allowed the media to get excited, to, promote that out to the whole world. And for certain people who absolutely were diehard Apple fans, to cause them to line up the night before a new product was about to be released.
Madness.
Just to get their hands on those first new products. And I actually know someone who did that. So people really did do those things. So I think, speaking can do so much for you. It's obviously a platform where you get to share your very important message with multiple people at once. Even if you're talking about a smaller setting, it's more people than just that one-on-one conversation. And as you said, that can also be recorded, and that can be used in all the other platforms that you were talking about. Rather than starting at the platform, the social media platform, you're starting at the speaking, and then you've got what you need. You've got the content for all the other platforms. So it saves time. It saves time for, executives, leaders in businesses who can deliver a message out to their whole business, whether it's to camera or, in a large town hall or something like that. If they can do that well and people actually understand what they want them to do moving forward and are inspired to continue to be part of that tribe and that brand, then that's a huge time saver for a really busy executive. And it also is a great way to lift your personal brand.
Yeah, indeed. Can't disagree with any of that. I'm just going to read out a bit of an excerpt from the report, just again for some background and some context. So we're talking post-pandemic now. You're saying the market competition increased. It became expected that speakers would pull more weight in not only cementing their presence online, but cross-promoting the events they spoke at. And the knock-on effect with this is that a lot of the speakers who are out there really upping their game, they created or refined their websites to ensure audiences could find them easily. They focused on content marketing to reach ideal clients and subsidise their speaking. And they shifted from a reliance on professional booking managers and speakers bureaus to building personal brands, which you just alluded to then. And I will quote you here: as larger numbers of speakers began to build personal brands online, the barrier to entry for the professional lowered as it became easier to learn how to speak and become a speaker. So what you're saying there is we've got a growth in the number of speakers post-pandemic. Would it also be fair to say that a lot of those are more entrepreneurial types?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. And there's so many opportunities to speak as an entrepreneur because there's so many lessons in entrepreneurism. So many angles you can take. You don't have to necessarily be speaking about your area of expertise. Of course you can be, but you can be speaking about the lessons of having to get out there, run your own business, drive your own sales, do your own marketing. You're the one woman or man show often as an entrepreneur. So absolutely there's platforms for entrepreneurs to get out there and speak more so than ever, I think.
Yeah.
And, it depends what your goal is for speaking, but for an entrepreneur, the goal often is to sell something else. So you can there's lots of opportunities to speak with no speaker fee. And that might seem like, you're ripping yourself off or you're not doing the best service. But I think it just depends on what your end goal is, because it's not about the speaker fee often, it's about what you can generate from that speaking opportunity. And a good entrepreneur can generate a lot more than a 10, 20, 30K, whatever it might be, speaker fee if they do that speech particularly well.
Yeah, you're right. And in my world, in the PR and comms world, that's earned media. You're earning the right, and the stage is the media outlet. And if you can get on a stage in a way that's strategic, as in it's an industry event with your ideal audience there, they've set that up for you. We see people, in business doing speeches all the time and never asking for a fee. It's when your personal brand becomes big and you probably veering more towards becoming a thought leader. You got a book that you want to sell and you becoming more of that, I guess, thought leader, educational entrepreneur who's selling their expertise and maybe training, and it just all blends today. So I think the audience is probably a bit of both: the people who want to do the speaking gigs from an earned media point of view to build their brand and their profile and their reputation, maybe to sell product or maybe just to gain more visibility, might be to gain experience so they can become a professional speaker down the track. I know I did 50 free talks before I ever got paid. And the other one is that, if you want to get paid and you want to make it as part of an income source, then you got to apply it in a different way, because your audience will be very different across the board. Whereas, the speaker that wants to do it for earned media purposes, it's about the platform, Whereas when you're getting paid for it, it's less about that and more about, finding someone who's going to pay you to speak at their event. So you talked about 3 big shifts in the report. So I want to, if you can walk us through that, and we can have a discussion about each one. So there's 3 big shifts. The shift number 1 is from information to immersion. So this is what you're seeing with your research. So from information to immersion, I can get a good feel for what that's about, but why don't you break it down for us?
Yeah, so if we think about the person that's speaking at the business conferences to start with, let's go there, which can be the entrepreneur, it can be someone from within a business. Often that person who is not a professional speaker necessarily either doesn't really want to do it, so they're not in the mindset of doing it, or they think they're pretty good. And often what they're doing is they're just getting information across to the audience. They're not really thinking about entertaining the audience. Now, I don't mean that you have to get up there and do a pantomime or be a dancing monkey. And those who do entertain the audience, like really blow them away, engage them on a deeper level, they are the ones that are remembered. They are the ones that people go up to afterwards and want to talk to further. And that's when the business deals are done. So when I say, entertainment, not information, and immersion, engagement, all of those words, it's really about what we're helping speakers do now is really blend. So we take that traditional keynote speaking and place strategically placed theatrical magic, I call it, within that talk to really blow that audience away, to be unforgettable rather than just, oh yeah, there was that speaker, what did they talk about? They did have a good point.
Yeah.
And because there's so many speakers on the one day often at these types of events.
You're right, and we've all been there and sat through them, and they put the PowerPoint up with the bullet points, and I can't believe people still do that. not knocking
Yes.
PowerPoint on a presentation, but there are ways to do it, as we know. And how many speakers have you seen, have you dealt with, probably, who wrote it the night before? And they're still doing it 10 or 11 o'clock at night the night before, my Lord. But when you're talking about, I don't want to scare people off about the word theatrical, as you said. I know you did provide a bit of context around that, but it still sounds entertaining. What am I juggling? Do I have to play games? What's some examples of being entertaining that's not going to scare people off in the first instance as a speaker?
All right. Well, I think let's go back to what you just said, which was most people finish the talk the night before. And when I say finish the talk, they finish updating their bullet points on their PowerPoint slides. Or let's give a bit more credibility. Let's hope they've got some images or something like that on their PowerPoint slides. So what happens then is that when you're on stage, that's your first rehearsal. Okay, so a theatre actor would never deliver to a real audience in their first rehearsal. And I can tell you now, if any of you do go and watch theatre, you wouldn't pay the price that you pay for a professional ticket if you were watching that first rehearsal. So you can become more entertaining just by being able to deliver your talk a whole lot better. Now, I think we really do need to move past the bullet point PowerPoint slides, though, to be honest. And if you had prepared, so my mantra that I say to clients is, you are the lead in your message. Any tool you use is the supporting cast. So your PowerPoint is not your message. The only reason you should ever have a slide up there is to add impact to what you're doing. And therefore, not every single thing you say on that stage requires you to have the slides up behind you. So let's get rid of them when you don't need them. And I'll give the audience a little tip. I'm sure a lot of the speakers that might be listening will know this, but you can literally just press B on your keyboard if you're on PowerPoint, or on the clicker when you're on stage, there'll be a button and it will blank it out. And then the way that you give your information in storytelling, I'm sure that listeners have heard this before, storytelling is key. So don't just tell us about the data or the thing or the information. Tell it to us in a story, because first of all, we're going to remember it. I think the statistics say about 65% of what you say is remembered when you tell it as a story, versus about 5% memory when it's just data and statistics alone. So tell us it as a story, and I promise you, you are so much more interesting than your PowerPoint. So when I'm working with people that are just starting out, or even in corporate world, we're talking about boardrooms, that's one of the things that when we start stripping back that PowerPoint and actually hear from the person and hear their passion come through, because you're an expert in what you're up there talking about, that's when it's much more entertaining than hiding behind the PowerPoint slides or letting them shine brighter than you.
Yeah, and it is hiding. I think it is hiding behind the PowerPoint slides. I mean, there are types of speakers where they have got a lot of information to convey and got examples to give and everything, and videos and images work well and can provide real impact, and even a beautiful big font with the key message on it. But you're relying on that as well, and it drives, every time you click, you're driving your presentation forward, but you're being led by the PowerPoint. And as you say, if you relax into it and start telling a few stories, and I guess that's the key, is that people, again, who have been around the block a bit, they've got the stories. They've just got to find what are the stories that are going to resonate. Make them preferably from your experience, because that way you can tell it better than. I tell a lot of stories in my presentations, but often I tell other people's stories because I'm giving examples in what I do. Yeah. And I find telling other people's stories incredibly hard, because, you have to immerse and you have to know it, but it's not you. The moment you start telling your own story or something that's happened to you, it's so much easier and so much more compelling for people. That's me anyway. I'd be surprised if other people find otherwise.
Yes, and it's interesting because sometimes what you need is someone else to just listen to your background and your stories and to pull things out for you, because you don't realize how much gold you're sitting on with all the experience you've had and all the stories you tell. You're like, oh yeah, I did this, that, and the other, and you're like, that's amazing. Like, that's a great story. Let's just craft that a little bit and tell the truth, obviously, but let's craft it in a way that's really going to resonate with the audience, because it is valuable. But sometimes we just don't see that our experience is valuable for our audiences or for other people.
That's a really good point. I think, we're all got great stories within us, and it's getting them out and understanding it, and knowing what is a good story and getting it out is probably 80% of the battle, and 20% is the telling of it. The just before we leave that point from information to immersion, so if people want to take it up a notch, so yes, less reliance on PowerPoint, turn the PowerPoint off with whatever it was, the on the clicker, or the B, I didn't know that. B for banish on the keyboard.
There you go. I like it.
And telling the stories and being obviously relaxed on stage and telling those stories, and there's obviously the how you deliver it, of course, but we won't get into that. But if people wanted to take something up a notch, what does that look like? What's some examples that you see or you've done in your own presentations and keynotes where you've added a little bit of theatrics to it? I'm just trying to dig into what's a little bit of theatrics, nothing over the top. It might be the way you dress when you come on board. It might be a prop. It might be a game you play with the audience. What are some couple of little techniques or tactics that people can use theatrically speaking?
Theatrically speaking. Yeah, well, I think you just touched, if we're just going to go up just a notch from our standard PowerPoint we were talking about before, then I think music or sound is something that can be added that can make a really big difference to just the experience and the feeling that the audience can get during a presentation. And there's lots of different ways that can be done. Obviously, it always needs to be relevant to the message. So I just want to make that really, really clear that we always start at the message and then you build on what's going to cement that message or immerse the audience in that message even more. So sound is an option. At a just a step up level, though, definitely playing with your audience or, having some kind of activity where they have to use their own physiology and move and have an experience themselves does make a difference for sure, because it's memorable. It means they're not just sitting the whole time and listening to you. They're actually doing. People learn through doing as well as listening. So you're capturing different types of learners and behavior types in the audience. And I think as well, little snippets of video can be really powerful. Videos that are too long are not helpful.
We're talking 30 seconds max.
Yeah, 30 second snippets. Like, think about social media really has changed the way we absorb information and our attention spans. So I know there was a research done many years ago by someone called Dr. John Medina. And at the time, he was watching speakers, and his research said that exactly 10 minutes into any presentation, if the speaker didn't change gear in some way, so that could be through sharing the PowerPoint, not sharing the PowerPoint, it could be through shifting your body, using your voice differently, then they would lose the audience. I think that is so much quicker these days. I haven't done a study or the research, but I know from experience that we have to shift gears more often as the speaker to continue to hook the audience back in. So using the stage, like if I'm talking at a very basic level, a lot of people are still wedded to the lectern, for instance, at business conferences, if we're talking about business conferences. And unfortunately, sometimes the way the stage is set up is designed for that to happen. Whenever I'm working with clients, I'm like, get out from behind the lectern, because if you can use the space and we can use your body, you'll have more rapport with the audience, you'll have more energy up there, and that energy will translate to your audience. So in terms of performance, if we're talking at the very sort of basic business keynote, we can get out from behind the lectern, you can use the space, you can have a little bit of audience interaction and vary your voice people will say to me, Carmen, I just need to make sure I'm authentic. And yes, as I said, it's you. You're not a dancing monkey up there. You've got to be authentic. What you don't realise, though, is authentic you has range in your voice, has range in the way you use your body. And the best way that I describe this to clients is think about how you behave when maybe you've got a cute puppy or a little baby in front of you. So the biggest, strongest men with the deepest voices might still say, oh my goodness, aren't you cute? Oh, aren't you beautiful? So they're using a higher pitched voice and maybe a softer voice, and they're smiling, and all these things are happening. And then you might be at the football and you're using your big, strong voice and you're yelling out at the players and you're yelling at the umpires, and, your arms are going wide, and it's still authentically you. So there's lots of range that you have that we're often not tapping into
light
in that setting, because as you said, many people, light and shade, many people still have a bit of a fear, and others that don't have a fear just haven't explored that.
Yeah.
And potentially are still, if they're finishing their PowerPoint the day before or so, they haven't even given themselves the opportunity to rehearse that, film themselves, see what they look like and what could they do to cause more impact in their message.
Like the audio side of things too. I mean, video changes the ball game a lot more, but audio is, I find, very powerful, and we have some tools and services today to get stuff done, to get something done audio-wise. Even I'd be interested in your take on an introduction, whether you can do an audio introduction that someone else does, but it's recorded. I'll give an example to what I mean. I did a keynote at a big conference once at a resort, and it was just after morning tea, and I wanted people in my room, not the other person's room, because they'd split us off. And so I got done an audio recording of a guy in a Cockney gangster voice, and I had a photo of a gangster-like scary man full up on the screen, and I got him to, hey, you come in here, come on, and I basically told a little story about come up the front, darling, come on, and hey, your trouble out the back, you can move on, that sort of stuff. But I had a bit of fun with it. It's something that I would normally do, but that was pre, but it certainly got people engaged from the outset, only because it was loud and different. But I got that made for probably $20 using Fiverr.com, using a really top voiceover artist, and I wrote the script for them and they delivered it overnight, and I had it instantly. Yeah. So, we can be creative. It doesn't have to cost the earth, and, think differently about intros and audio and, maybe some small video snippets. Just before we leave that one, what, I've forgotten the term you use, when you got to shift gears. I think that's what you said. What was the research showed, and what do you think it should be now, because it's shortened?
So back then it was
every
10
minutes to shift gears. What would you think? It feels like a lifetime today, as you say.
I know. I mean, if you think the standard TED Talk now is down to about 10 to 15 minutes, so we only want to listen for that long.
What would you suggest people to shift gears?
I think within the first minute or two, you need to blow people away in the first minute or two, and you definitely be shifting gear by 2 minutes. Like if someone's standing there talking for 2 minutes and there hasn't been much change or gear change in what they're doing, you've already lost the audience. That's what I believe.
It's a tough game. Okay, so you've touched on that. So shift one is from information to immersion, and I think everyone will agree with that. If you've sat through keynotes, and it's interesting when you do see a lot of keynotes in one hit. And I've been to presentations where put on by a speakers bureau, and they've got pros doing it, professionals, and you might see 10 in an hour, and they've got not long. And it's interesting to even watch the pros do it right across the board. But if you go to a business conference, it ranges from, we do remember the one or two that stood out for all the reasons you talk about. So it really does matter. Shift number 2, you've touched on it. And so let's go a little bit deeper. From aspiration to authenticity. What do you mean by this shift?
I think it's because of the amount of AI and computer generated videos and information we can get these days that people are more skeptical than ever, and so they just really want to resonate with you as the speaker on stage. And so I think, and that's where your personal stories, as you were talking about before, Trevor, really help and come into it, and not just the wins. So people resonate more deeply often with the struggles, with the times when it just did not work, and you know, you maybe thought you could never recover from it, and how you got yourself back. So we love that, you know, hero's journey in any story. But vulnerability, yeah, absolutely. Yes, showing that vulnerability, showing that you're human. I think that human connection is just so incredibly important these days, and that goes past your talk too, because, and you know, again, whenever I'm working with clients, I'll say to them, I can make you a great speaker, I can help you sell from stage, all the things, but you've got to be able to do the thing we're talking about post that, because you'll very quickly get found out if you're just all bells and whistles on a stage and there's no credibility behind that. You've got to have that authenticity and credibility behind you. And I think it sounds like your audience is exactly that. They're experienced, they've done it for a long time, they've had the failures, they've had the wins. They're the people that we crave to hear from these days, I believe.
It's you know, the word authenticity and authentic has been, you know, misused so many times, but you know, if you boil it down to its essence, and what I'm gathering here is, you know, I guess we used to have the speakers that were the, you know, we all aspire to, and they're perfect and everything's great, and you know, they've never had a failure in their life, versus, you know, telling authentic stories, being yourself on stage. You know, there's nothing worse than you know, getting seeing someone who you've followed for a long time, watching them on stage and having seen them in videos and maybe in the media, and then you get to talk to them later if they allow you to talk to them later, and you know, it's the experience is not good, you know, and that's the, what is it, never meet your idols because you'll be disappointed. But we see that the whole time is that, you know, a lot of leaders, and I know this from fact, I spoke to one guy who used to teach them in acting, like acting, to act the part of a CEO versus be themselves. And so when you've got that mindset of crafting this persona, and you put it on YouTube or whatever and everywhere, and it will naturally flow to the stage, then it's hard to keep up, you know, like it's better to be you and work out what makes you unique and what does authentic mean to you. And you're right, we crave that authenticity now, particularly in an AI world, and we're real people who want to deal with real people, and that's the beauty of speaking, is that is that connection. You know, you're not going to be the AI created avatar, although, you know, we do get the technology is there, isn't it? I know that Tony Robbins did a talk in Australia once, but he wasn't here. And they've got the ABBA show where they're creating the actual avatars on the stage. So that's what we're up against. You know, we're up against avatars. I still can't even 3D avatars. I've never seen one in action. I've only read about it and seen pictures, but wow, that's where we're going. So the move to authenticity, from aspiration to authenticity, agree 100% on that. I think that's a really good way to go, and it's a great way for people to judge if they mean, I don't have to, thank God I don't have to create this persona and this bombastic speaker on stage. And that doesn't, and I'll get your thoughts on this, that doesn't really mean, I mean, a lot of speakers are introverted, but they get on stage and they're big and they're strong and they perform and they do well, but they're actually probably a little shy and introverted. I don't see that as inauthentic. That's just meaning you're putting your best self out there, and then, you know, you can be a little bit shy off stage as well. You don't have to be a full-on extrovert all the time to be able to be a speaker.
That's exactly right. I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because that's me, and that was me as a child. So I was the shy child in class, but I was the big character on stage when I was acting. And it felt completely authentic for me to be that person on stage, and that's who I was off stage. So I think for someone to be really engaging on stage, they do need to be a little bit bigger than they would be if they're speaking to one person, face to face, because of the space. The energy that you need to look normal up there is going to be more than if you were just in a small meeting room or just with a couple of people. So there's the two angles to that authenticity. It's the one I was talking about earlier, where I'm coaching clients to say, it feels big for you, it looks amazing and feels really natural for us. Let's look at the tape so you can see you don't look crazy up there. And then there's also the don't pretend to be someone you're not when you're up there, because you're going to get found out.
And I just want to say there, I mean, there might be a feeling of a bit of disconnect here, and we can knock it on the head, but, you're from an acting background, you talk about acting and theatrics and stuff. That doesn't mean you're up there acting. you're... No, you are your own character. Yes. You're yourself. You're playing yourself.
And as I said, there's facets of you. So, if you love dancing with your friends, you might go crazy on the dance floor, but if you are in a business setting, it might be quite daunting for you to have to stand up and speak in front of a group of people. But we could tap into some of that stuff that happens when you're on the dance floor to, have you do what you need to do up there.
Talk about making an impact.
I don't mean you should dance in a boardroom. Let's make sure that that message doesn't go out to anybody.
Mind you, if you can do the moonwalk, I do suggest it, but that's it doesn't take much room and much energy to do it, but it looks great. And shift number 3 from matter to meaning. So we've had from information to immersion, shift number 2, aspiration to authenticity, and shift number 3, the final of the 3 shifts, from matter to meaning. Unpack that for us, please, Carmen.
Well, I think that the meaning, the audience is who takes away the meaning, isn't it? So as the speaker, it's our responsibility to really make sure that whatever message we have is meaningful for the audience. So obviously it's always needed to matter to the audience, but we need it to be really meaningful to stand out to the audience moving forward, because there's so many options now, because there's so much content available, not just by going to a live speaking gig or event, but as you said, we can listen to podcasts, we can consume shows on Netflix at a drop of a hat. There's just so much, YouTube, etc. If the audience isn't taking any meaning from what you're saying, then you're not going to be remembered and you're not going to stand out.
And you want to stand out and you want people to remember you because you want to get your message across and all the great stuff that comes with that. So this has been great. I'm going to get you to unpack before we finish up your story method, but I just want to tie things in a bow where we are now. So in terms of speaking in 2025 and beyond, there's lots of opportunities, but there's also lots of competition. Having a strong personal brand is really important today to attract audiences to your speech. Speaking today is anything from a boardroom presentation to being on YouTube or on a big stage or, at a seminar, whatever, So there's speaking covers a multitude of sins, a lot of different modalities for that. But as you say, you want to win the hearts and the minds of people. And if you're going to do that, you need to entertain them today and immerse them in an experience. And therefore, your presentation needs to be more performance-based. I got all that right? That's right. But the opportunities are there, whether it's to promote your business and build your brand as a thought leader, or as, maybe evolving into a professional speaker where you actually get paid and you build up. And as you, publish books or get on bigger stages or get more media coverage, you can start snowballing that into a more of a professional speaking career where you get paid. So there's lots of opportunities there. Walk us through, you call it the Illuminated Story method, just so people understand, because you go beyond conventional speech coaching and it's all about as much about the content and than it is about the delivery. So can you walk us through that just so people can get an idea that if they want to take things up a notch, what's the sort of things that they have to look at?
Yeah, definitely happy to do that. So, and I'm glad you just mentioned that it's not just about the delivery, it's about the content. So the way I think about that, if you think about a movie, have you ever seen a movie that has an all-star cast, but it was pretty average?
Yeah, those ensemble casts are going to be shockers sometimes.
There are some good ones, but yes, there's lots that are not great. So if you think about it, the delivery is still good because they're great actors. They've been in amazing movies, they can act, but the script, the content is probably what's weak, a bit average. So, and I think of, keynotes and presentations exactly the same. If you don't have both really happening for you and both the content and the delivery at that really great level, then you'll only ever get okay or good. You're not going to get outstanding and excellent, which is what the Illuminated Story method has been developed for. So from a high level perspective, we deep dive into whoever, if I'm working with a speaker, for instance, so we work with a lot of people who are already speaking and getting paid for speaking, and we'll pull apart their message. So, go right back to the beginning. Who's your audience? What are you actually trying to get across? What do you want to be remembered for? What's the goal moving forward? What's your vision for the next 5 years? All of those things go back to the start. And then we look at, what could we do with your script, your content, that could make it stickier and potentially more emotive? How could we use, the Hollywood formula and the Broadway formulas to lift whatever it is you're doing? Even just a few percent sometimes makes a huge difference to the outcome that the person's getting. So we look at all of that content piece, and then of course we look at then what experience do we want to create for the audience and what's available to us depending on the type of venues that you're going to be speaking in. So there might need to be levels, because as you know, as a speaker yourself, sometimes you're speaking in a venue where we would never have the opportunity to shift the lighting, for instance. But then for some very big speakers that are speaking at huge events, we absolutely have the opportunity to design a lighting plan as well as, the sound and be quite theatrical in that way. So I look at it as looking at minimalistic theatre. There's beautiful productions out there where it's a very minimalist set, and there's not a lot of reliance on the experience being about the lighting and the sound and all the rest of it. It's the actual performance from the actors on stage, the story, and the way that engagement happens with the audience that makes it so wonderful. And then you go to the productions that are maybe like musical theatre that have all the special effects, bells and whistles, etc. That is an option as well, depending on the type of speaker you are and the type of stages that you're commanding. So the Illuminated Story method works from that, I call it the foundational stage, which is all the pre-thinking before we even get started, through to how do we make your content that Hollywood, Broadway style amazing, through to what makes sense from a delivery point of view that's going to blow your audience away, that we can actually execute for you in the spaces you want to speak.
See, and some people think you just get up on stage and riff.
I know. Well, even if I pair it right back to working with corporates, which I do as well, they get blown away with exactly what you were talking about before, because I know a lot of your audience are maybe more at that point where they're wanting to maybe just start speaking or talk about their journey. And if you can just spend as much time on rehearsing and delivery as you do on preparing your content, that will set you up to be better than a lot of people already. So that could be one thing that you start doing that will make a difference. But
don't memorise your lines.
No. Wow. Do you know, interesting. I always say to clients, because you're not an actor, so actors memorise lines, like they have to memorise scripts. And they're trained to make it sound like they've just thought of that in that moment. Like it's me actually speaking. Whereas when you're not trained, even if you're not reading your notes, you sound like you're reading your notes. You sound like you're reciting something. And therefore you don't sound like you're talking to me. And as the audience member, I want you to talk to me. And I want to feel like everything you're saying on that stage is for me specifically as an individual in the crowd of thousands. That's how I want you to make me feel.
Can I say,
So yes, good tip.
It
Don't
is
do that.
damn hard. I made that mistake early in my speaking career, and it was the worst thing I've ever done and the hardest thing I've ever done. And, you forget your lines halfway through and you're thrown, like, no, just don't do it. You might have rehearsed your opening line and all of that sort of stuff, but don't be scripted.
Don't memorize a script.
No.
Yeah.
There's no winner. There's no winners
Very
in that.
good.
All right. Thank you very much, Carmen. This has been terrific. And I just want to take, just before we leave, so you did say this, these are the things you think about before, as you're putting together your keynote. Let's take a step and look pre-thinking. What's some advice, or what can people start thinking about now if they say they're sitting listening to this or standing or on the treadmill or whatever, and they say, well, I want to do more speaking. I can do it as an earned media play just to get my chops, but maybe it's something I can develop into a more paid gig at some point. What frame of mind should they be in now before they even start down the track? What are some, just give us their headspace, that what they need to be aware of before they even get into a coaching or a training situation, or before they even start thinking about their keynote. The pre-thinking.
The pre-thinking. Well, I think it would be just reflecting on your experience and your expertise and your journey, and thinking about two things. So one is, what do you want to share with the world? What legacy do you want to leave? What impact do you want to have? And then where are those audiences, and what's in it for them? So what does your audience want to hear? Why would they want to hear it? And then that will give you some really good questions to answer, to then start thinking about what your topic would be that you'd want to start creating.
Terrific. That is excellent advice there, and lots for people to think about. And it's not a competition, and it's not a speed to market thing. It's something that you can evolve into. But when you've already got the background and the goods, and you've probably done talking in the past, and you've never taken it as seriously as you perhaps could, then you're in probably a better position than most other people who do it kicking and screaming.
Definitely.
So that is terrific. Thank you very much, Carmen. Where's the best place online for people to find you?
Yeah, they can go to illuminatedstory.com, and on that site you'll actually find a masterclass that really dives into some of the concepts we've been talking about today. So that's an extended video that could be quite interesting for a lot of your audience members.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And thank you for sparing us your time out of your busy schedule to provide some insights and ideas and some things to think about in the speaking world.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, Trevor.